Song for the Hunter, Chapter 1. Did my mother take the decision of marriage too lightly, or were her choices simply as limited as mine? I have always wondered. From Camilla Bonnet's journal. Late June, 1808. A stiff breeze snapped tendrils of Camilla Bonnet's hair about her wind-burned face as she clung to the gunwale of the long Montreal canoe. Its 8 voyageurs leapt into the shallow lake surf, making the craft jerk and wobble, assuring Camilla she was indeed pregnant. Her stomach lurched with each opposing shift of their weight. No good would come of her losing her peas porridge in front of them all, for it was far too soon for her secret to be revealed. She had yet to grasp it herself. Climbing to the wharf, factoring his own weight into the upset, Camilla's husband Ambrose turned and reached for her. Steady now. She offered him a weak smile as she slipped her hand in his and rose to unsteady feet. Swallowing down a sour knot, she lifted the edge of her skirts and stepped onto the long pier. She eased out a breath and smoothed the hair from her face to better study the gentle slope of Madeline Island, christened after the trader's wife said to be an Ojibwe princess. Dark-haired children ran chattering along the waterfront, evidence of a village nearby. Porters moved around her as they unloaded bundles of trade goods from the 4 30-foot canoes and carried them ashore. They marched in a line, past remnants of an old fort, toward the trading post. Camilla turned about and shielded her eyes against the brilliance of the afternoon sun to peer toward the mainland across the bay. The natives and voyageurs called it Wisconsin. Perhaps a league distant, its wooded headland rose above the water. A beautiful country, is it not? And this island post so well situated? Ambrose spoke beside her, then bent to fetch the trunk. Oui, it is. She inhaled a deep draught of air, hoping to ease the turbulence inside. Perhaps there would be something other than water to drink inside the trading post. Tea would suit best. Hoisting the filthy hem of her gown again, she trudged behind Ambrose up the beach toward the giant swaying firs, slowly gaining her land legs as she left the Lac Supérieur Bay behind. Oh, to only get out of this dreadful sun and lay her pounding head on a soft mattress, should one be had. How very doubtful that was. La Pointe was a primitive post, though she'd been led to believe that Michael Cadeau, the trader in charge, had been well educated back in Montreal. Such remembrance gave her hope for some amenity. At least she would not have to travel any farther west, unlike her brother's brigade, which had left Montreal with them but paddled the lake's northern arch. Do you suppose Tristan will arrive at Fort William soon? She spoke to Ambrose's back. He chuckled. His brigade has some distance farther to travel than ours, my dear. It shouldn't be many more days, however. To Camilla, it really only mattered how long she would be able to rest here. When shall we expect him? Oh, not until August. Precisely when is uncertain. He cast her a smile over his shoulder. I'm sure Madame Cadeau will make you comfortable until our season of venturing is at an end and Tristan's brigade arrives. And I will count on you to keep an adequate record of your own discoveries here in your journal. He winked before focusing again on his footpath. She pressed against the deep pocket of her skirt, assuring herself her journal was still safely tucked within. They would have at least a month's wait, and then they would journey back to Montreal, where she would settle into a long winter's preparation for motherhood. The thought of being pregnant shocked her anew, yet it would not be a dreaded thing. How fine it would be to love someone with all her being who might return her love without condition. She glanced at Ambrose shouldering her trunk and his satchel ahead of her, just as the porters. A young man from the post ran to meet him and they shared some words. Ambrose was a decent man, but to say she had fallen in love with him would be a lie. She bore him a mild affection, but marriage to him had been a means to escape. Had she waited much longer to choose a husband, the opportunism of her father might have seen her married to someone much worse, like that crotchety old Scot, Monsieur Macdaw. Ambrose Bonnet was neither handsome nor homely, and his personality was at times overly excitable. Still, he had been better than her other options with their fat wallets, wandering eyes, or aged disability. her father had been considering for her. She might not love Ambrose wholeheartedly, but she could accept and endure him. She sensed in him the making of a better father than her own had been. Then, perhaps it was wishful thinking, and only time would tell, for with Ambrose's rise in her father's company, might not he yield to his father-in-law's influences in ways that stretched beyond business? Please God, he would not. They passed the place of the old fort, which must have been a pivotal situation along Lake Superior's southern shore during the wars. Madeline Island was the largest of a collection of islands called the Apostles, though the voyageurs said that there were 22 rather than 12. "Come, my darling." Ambrose paused to wait for her as the boy scampered off. "I will inquire as to whether Monsieur and Madame Cadeau have a room waiting for us." Such an exhilarating thought. A room. 4 square walls. No more nights on a bed of cedar boughs with only a tarp or canoe over their heads. At least not until the return voyage home. No matter that the trader's house would likely be rustic and probably smell of seasoning hides. It was a room. Camilla quickened her pace behind him. He directed her attention to a sprawling oak standing nearby like a sentinel. "Perhaps you wish to wait in the shade with your trunk while I greet Gitchy Machine at the storehouse." He smiled proudly at his use of the native's name for Michael Cadeau. Great Michael, indeed. A sigh escaped her. "Oh, oui, that would be most pleasant." To avoid a smelly storehouse, for the breeze beneath the shade would refresh her before she had to meet the Cadeaux, as well as afford her a further study of her new surroundings. "I will not be long. There is the house, see?" She turned her attention in the direction he nodded, and her heart thumped in pleasant surprise. A modest 2-story home built of sturdy lathed logs nestled along the edge of the trees. Next to it, a rustic fence of upright cedar poles enclosed a garden. The tidy structure was a most welcoming sight and hinted at more civilization than she'd imagined in such a place. "And there is the storehouse." He nodded toward another building constructed of squared logs joined in dovetail fashion at the corners. Camilla sat on her trunk, and Ambrose went away whistling, as though he was one of the voyageurs and not the son-in-law of one of the Northwest Company's most prominent merchants. Had he been more like Tristan, he would puff out his chest and take great advantage of his position as James Clairbeau's agent and favored son-in-law. He would enlist servants to carry his bundles to and from the store, and he would esteem himself as a man to be catered to. Tristan would find means to please himself in every possible way during his venture. His self-centered nature would not be so easily appeased as Ambrose's boyish delight. Camilla leaned her back against the bark of the broad oak, thankful her father had assigned Ambrose to a separate brigade and different route than Tristan, at least for now. Marriage to Ambrose had freed her from her father's scrutinizing oversight, though not as far as she would have liked. Yet for this season, and with Tristan elsewhere, there was distance enough. She closed her eyes and inhaled the scent of pine on the fresh lake air. The crowded streets of Montreal, replete with the stink of its waste, was a distant memory. Here, freedom seemed possible, if only temporarily. If she could prevent Ambrose from knowing she was pregnant until the time came for their return, she might almost feel as if the constraints of her Montreal life didn't exist. On this island, she could hold her secret close while finding refuge from the July heat and humidity that hugged the inland country. It could be that the upcoming month might pass most pleasantly. She would write of her days and the hopes and dreams for her babe in her journal, her closest confidant besides God. When she opened her eyes again, she took in the layout of the commons and buildings more closely. Smoke ascended from what must be an outdoor summer kitchen and laundry. Chickens pecked in the dirt outside a small barn, and a woodshed was attached to another building. Tendrils of smoke carried on the breeze from cook fires somewhere beyond. Camilla brushed the dry beach sand from her slippers. Ambrose should return any moment. She glanced expectantly to the door of the storehouse, but the next figure to emerge was that of a native or possibly Métis man. He lifted his face toward her, almost as though he were aware someone watched from across the compound, for his eyes immediately found hers and widened. His steps slowed, and Camilla realized she was staring. For one heart-stuttering moment, she thought he might approach her. She jerked her gaze away as discomfort wormed through her. She had avoided these wilderness men when her husband wasn't present, the voyageurs, and especially the natives and métis. Men of lower social rank were not like the bourgeoisie in Montreal, who flirted and bantered, but whom she knew how to easily dismiss. In this country, they were unaccustomed to seeing a white woman, and her husband had warned her to be on her guard, for they would take their approaches to her more seriously and with greater curiosity. Who knew what dangerous thoughts lurked behind their dark countenances? She had enough experience of men to guess. In the moments she'd watched the stranger, however, she'd taken in his broad, bare shoulders and muscled torso. His hair was clubbed behind his head. He had a fine brow, and she stole another quick look. Penetrating eyes, watching her still, not turning away, but settling on her as he halted his pace toward the shore and stared at her outright. Camilla's breath caught high in her chest as she pulled her glance away again. Take a care, Camilla, or he will think you are extending an invitation. Ambrose must hurry, and she must not let herself be separated from him again in this place without a chaperone. Those are the first several pages of Song for the Hunter. I hope you will pre-order a copy of the book. It's coming out January 4th, and then you can find out what happens next. Thank you again.